Wealth Nation, let's talk about having an abundant retirement, shall we? One filled with cash flow, security, and certainty. My name is Carmen.
And I'm Darius. And there's this urban legend called a pension plan that I read about, but it seemed to have been elusive. But today we're going to have a conversation around retirement, and we're going to introduce Mr. Walter Young, who is the author of The Fifth Option, so knows all things retirement. And we're going to jump into the conversation around the fact that a lot of our clients around the ages of 50 feel like they don't have enough for retirement or haven't been prepared enough. So I want to introduce Walter to the conversation around retirement, because not only is our audience having this conversation, but I think nationwide there's a concern about retirement.
So Walter, welcome to the conversation. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Good morning. Very excited to be here.
Awesome.
Ever since we met, just a few months ago, we were like, oh, we got to connect. We got to become BFFs, because we know, for example, for our audience, we want to be able to serve them as much as we can. And then also just for our family, we have baby boomers, we have, people of all ages, shapes and sizes. And we also want to make sure that we're doing the best, not only for ourselves, but for our family. And so we felt like after we read The Fifth Option, Walter, again, thank you for the storyline, the plot, and just making it very simple for people to understand and digest the information, because I think how you created the story, it made the reader be able to follow along and see themselves, in the eyes of this book, and being able to see sometimes the ups and downs and rounds that we have to go through. So anything that you want to say on the book, Walter, before we dive in all things retirement?
Well, yeah, I think you said it right, which is the book is a story form. What I did is there's a lot of white papers and a lot of more research around retirement income planning. Remember, as you mentioned, this mythical creature called the pension, was a stable for retirement for many generations. And lately, of course, that's gone away. And so what I did was just take a lot of the research, a lot of the kind of academic approach, which isn't always fun to read, and then turn it into a story form that I think is a little bit more accessible for us mere mortals to be able to understand how retirement income can work, or at least a better approach to it.
Right.
Absolutely. And the best thing that I put here, or that you put on the cover, is why your retirement plan won't work the way you think it will. And that's what we want to debunk today. So, Walter, the biggest question that I just want to kind of open this thing up with is, why aren't people prepared for retirement?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that people are not taught that at the end of the day, what we're saving for, what's the purpose of saving, is to create cash flow when we stop working, right? None of us know exactly when that day is going to come. Some of it may be sooner than later, some may be unexpected, and some of it may be, at our own timing. But the reality is we have not learned how to generate cash flow or become a cash flow minded person. I'd like to tell people that there's two kinds of finance. There's corporate finance and there's personal finance. And although they share the same word finance, they manifest themselves totally differently. Corporate finance revolves around cash flow, earnings, the movement of money. Go on CNBC and you see the CFOs talking about earnings per share and what they've done for their shareholders. But personal finance, on the other hand, really revolves more around balance sheets, meaning how much have I saved? It's more of a how much have I saved? You sit down with a financial planner and the first thing they ask is, how much do you have in your 401k? How much do you have in your accounts? And so this is a totally different mindset approach. Cash flow is what we're after. Balance sheet is bragging rights, right? I have $1 million in my 401k. Well, when was the last time you went to a grocery store and were able to buy milk with your balance sheet statement, right? You can't do it. Even though I may have a lot of money in my statement, I got to turn that into cash flow. And that's the magic sauce, right? Balance sheet, I tell people, a balance sheet only approach is just like BS, right? It's just balance sheet. It's like beach mussels. They're fun to look at, but not necessarily useful. I've got to be able to turn my cash flow, my statement, into reliable cash flow. And that's the trick that we're trying to teach people, is to start with that mindset of building your assets towards some eventual cash flow event.
Right.
Well, and you said something so powerful that I hope you all picked up on, Wealth Nation, is that you said we're not taught to the purpose of saving. And regardless if you're in your retirement stages, or even if you're, 25 years old, we save to create cash flow, right? I think there's this stigma in our industry where it's like saving is always for this emergency fund, for this thing that you have to spend one day. But it's like, no, saving is going to be the catapult that's going to allow you to create the cash flow. So it's a big mindset shift in figuring out, like, how are we going to flex this muscle of saving? And if you get it early, That's, if correct me if I'm wrong, if you get it early, that's how we can be better prepared for retirement. But it isn't until we get to our late 40s and our late 50s and we're going, oh, that's what you meant by saving? We could have been saving 20 years ago. I think that's what I've seen.
Savings is just future cash flow. That's all it is, right? It's just cash flow that's been stored up. I kind of think of it like an iceberg, right? It's frozen cash flow. And at some point, you'll start to melt the iceberg when you need the cash flow. And the efficiency or the strategy I have to be able to melt that iceberg of future cash flow is what's the difference. You might have $1 million, I might have $1 million, but if your $1 million earns 6% and mine earns 4%, we have the same balance sheet, but in reality, we have a different cash flow. And who's the real winner then?
Right. Now, if we take it back to when pension plans were popular, it was because of the fact that they were a reflection of actuarial tables. Now, 401k, as I read in the book, was meant to be supplemental for the pension, but something happened where employers are like, oh, okay, we got this 401k. We don't have to worry about this pension anymore because we're on the hook for this money. Were they really on the hook since it was based on actuarial tables, or what was that transition?
Yeah, that's a good point. So pensions in the early days, remember the first private pension was started in the late 1800s with American Express. And the whole point of the pension was to retain and attract good talent. Even back then, HR was thinking that way. But one of the consequences was back in that day is that they would give somebody the idea that they would have this sum of money as a reward for service for as long as they lived. Well, back in the late 1800s, how long did we live? It wasn't really, the average person really didn't make it to 65. So it wasn't really this long protracted period of time that maybe companies thought they'd have to pay this pension for. But slowly, as pensions became more favorable, especially when Congress gave it some tax advantages, then that became one of the default ways that businesses gave people a benefit for that 30 years of work. And as slowly as people began to live longer, companies really are on the hook for having to pay that pension for as long as you live. And so that could, for some people, nowadays can be long periods of time. And so that's a liability on the corporation's balance sheets. And so when the 401k was born, it was really meant to be this augmented savings plan for higher net worth people. And of course, Wall Street and companies realized if we just shifted this, we could take away our liability of the pension, put all of the onus into this 401k, but the poor individual now doesn't have an income for life potentially, and may not even know how to deal with their 401ks. And now we're left with the modern retirement dilemma, which is I have to save all my money and I have to make sure it lasts, and I don't know how long it's going to last. And so it's just a much more challenging retirement system. My hunch is that we may eventually kind of go back to some modified form of that pension, because the experiment of people without pensions isn't working very well.
Right. Now, when you mentioned the liability was taken away from the employers, that meant that liability is on the actual people that own the 401ks now, right?
People, yeah, the worker. You and I who put money into the 401k, we have to figure out how much do I need and how to make it last and how to invest it and how to deal with the ups and downs of the markets. That the pensions, if you think about it, the pensions took all that risk, right? A pension, if we break it into its two components, is what we call actuarial science, meaning trying to understand how long someone's going to live, married with investments. So in my neck of the woods, we'll take Boeing as an example. Boeing might say, all right, we have thousands of retirees and we have a pension for them. And so the actuaries have to determine how long will my average worker last? How long will they live? And then the investment team has to figure out how to make enough money so that works. Now, here's the interesting thing about pensions. The average worker, let's say, maybe has a life expectancy of age 82 or age 83. Now, you and I both know that there will be people that live beyond age 83, right? Oh, yeah. So how can they afford to keep paying these people after life expectancy? Well, the answer is that some people, sadly, won't make it to age 83. And so on average, the pension knows they just have to fund it to this age. And they now know that the people that live longer are supported or subsidized by the people that don't live quite as long. Well, we don't get that math with a 401k. All we get is what we talked about earlier, a balance sheet statement, right? We have no idea how long either one of you two might live. You may live into your hundreds, you may not. And unfortunately, you don't have that predictability of income for a lifetime that a pension can give you. Instead, you have this lump sum of money, and you have to figure out how much can I take out each year so I don't run out of money and still enjoy a retirement.
Right.
So I was going to say, Walter, I think it sounds like what you're saying is that you have to own your own lifestyle. I think as we're having this conversation of like having the thought of recognizing that when the employer shifted the liability, the minute you said that, I was like, oh, here we go. We go and put that responsibility on you. And now we're sitting here going, we don't know what to do because we don't have any more money. And it's like, you never took ownership. Right. And going back to shifting the responsibility, IULs popped in my head, but that's another story. That's another day. We wanted to really make sure that we paint the picture, family, that this is your responsibility, right? And when you think that your 401k is going to do it for you, or when you think that your Roth is going to do it for you, right? You're putting some external value on a product that you think is going to perform, when really everything has to start with you first, and your awareness and your determination to save to create cash flow. Because the reason why you're running out of money at retirement is because you didn't take control of the process. Right. And now we're recognizing that I'm coming up to the age of retirement, and we have to look in the mirror and figure out, what are we going to do?
Right. Now, the 401k is still good for supplemental retirement purposes, correct?
Yes, the 401k is fantastic, especially up to the match, right? We love, and we want to take our employers' money if they're going to offer it to us, right? There's no question that is a very helpful component, but it may not be the full story, right? And we have to understand that. We have to understand how retirement income really works. And if you give me a second, let me give you a little parable that I call the desert island dilemma. All of us have to solve this riddle in order to retire in the right format with the right elements. So let me give you just a couple of minutes of the story that's part of the book here. Imagine you wash up on a desert island, and you look around and you realize that this is a deserted island. And we look down into the waves and the beach, and you see this bobbing barrel. And you run down to the edge of the water, you pull up this barrel, you open the lid, and you can smell the sweet smell of fresh water. And then the thought hits you: is this all the water I have to drink? And as you look around the island, you realize this barrel of water is all the water you have to drink on the island. And as you're drinking it greedily because you're thirsty, you realize, wait a minute, how much water can I drink each day and stay alive? Well, there'd be two questions you would love to know. The first question is, how long will I be on this island? And as you look around, you see there's no boats on the horizon. There's no planes over skies. You may be here for a while. The second question you'd love to know is, will it ever rain? And when you look up into the sky, you see nothing but a blazing sun. So if I don't know how long I'll be on this island, and I don't know if it's ever going to rain, how much water can you drink? When I ask that question to people, invariably they say, as little as possible to stay alive, right? And so now let's just shift the scene for a second. That's the desert island dilemma. But let's shift the scene and say now it's your last day of work, and you're celebrating with your coworkers, and your boss gives you this barrel of money. And that barrel of money is all the money you have for retirement. And when you drive home, you're thinking of all the fun things you're going to do now that you're retired. But the thought hits you, wait a minute, this barrel of money has to last my lifetime. Well, how much money can I spend each day? Well, wouldn't we want to know two questions? The first question is, how long will I live? I can't know that answer. And how will my money perform? I can't know that answer either. So if I don't know how well my money is going to perform, and I don't know how long am I going to live, how much money can I spend each day? And people tell me again the same thing, very little, right? Because I have to be wary of the fact that this barrel of money has to last for however long that is. And I really don't understand how long that's going to be. And that's the modern retirement dilemma. So there's been a lot of research that was done in the 90s. You probably have all talked about it before, which came out with the 4% rule, which basically said, if I take rolling 30-year periods of time from 1926 to 1956, 1927 to 1957, what was the most money I could withdraw so that I kept $1 after 30 years? And there was one period of time where if I took out more than 4%, I was out of money. And so that became known as the 4% rule. But here's the problem with the 4% rule, is that I need millions of dollars for that to work, don't I? If I have $1 million, then they're suggesting I could take out $40,000 a year plus inflation. Well, if I'm used to living on $100,000 or $120,000, that's quite a pay cut. And so most traditional financial planning will tell you this: if you don't like that 40,000 is enough, then you get what I call four frustrating options. The first is I can save more money, which is always a possibility. But when I save more money, what's happening? I'm actually having this war between my current lifestyle and my future lifestyle, aren't I? Second, I could take more risk, hoping to get better returns. But most people, as they retire, tend to want to become a little bit safer and not ride the roller coaster of the stock market. Third, we can work longer. Well, who wants to work longer? And is there a guarantee your job will be around or your body can do the job? And fourth, unfortunately, what lots of people start to do is they just capitulate and say, I guess I'll just have to live on less. And sadly, this is when the people start to say things like, well, I guess I don't need to travel and I don't need to go to dinner. And maybe I won't be able to visit the kids during Christmas. I'll just have to write them Christmas cards, right? We get this kind of reduction of lifestyle that gets sad to see. But what if there was a fifth option? An option so powerful that it changed the game entirely. And that is the basis of the book, The Fifth Option.
Whew.
Awesome.
I got goosebumps just hearing you speak, Walter, because the going back to the desert island, we read it. We've heard you say the desert island multiple times. And I don't know, for this interview, I got emotional listening to you talking about the desert island, because that was the first time that I was really like putting myself in the shoes of our listeners, of our clients, of our potential clients, where people are saying, oh my goodness, I just left my job, or I'm approaching that last day, and I don't know how much longer or how much I'm going to be able to use of my income every time. And it's a powerful illustration. Thank you very much for sharing that again, because this is real. This is life. And the other thing too that made me recognize too while you were speaking was the mindset in all of this. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of times we have these conversations about abundant thinking, about scarcity thinking, and you immediately, how can you not help but go into a scarcity mindset as you're approaching retirement, because all you're thinking about is, what can I do to hold on to this gallon of water? What can I do to hold on to this bucket of money, or my 401k, or whatever it is? Like you said, I may not see the grandchildren this year. They're going to have to get a Christmas card, or and it just shouldn't be that way. So we hope today, family, to give you some tangible things that you can do to make sure that you're preparing better for retirement and that you don't outlive your money. So let's talk about that fifth option, Walter, since you alluded to that. Where do we start? Where do we start here?
So one of the things we want to understand is that the magic sauce of a pension was the marriage of actuarial science and investments, right? Those two came together to provide a robust income for as long as you lived, right? People with pensions are genuinely happy. We know from studies that they actually live longer than people without pensions. And one of the things that we understand is there's a lot less stress. And guess what? When I know money's coming again next month, I will spend this month's money. And so I have something to look forward to. There's this cash flow that continuously comes my way, and I can go and live the lifestyle that cash flow allows me to do. So the fifth option is trying to basically recreate that power, which is I want my investments, like you talked about, 401ks or investments accounts, to be married with actuarial science. Well, actuarial science is really just a fancy word for insurance, right? For most of the wealth nation, we know they probably have a whole life insurance policy, or have talked about a whole life insurance policy. But you've used that for self-banking and ability to reduce your opportunity loss on interest and things that you make purchases with. But what if we just dialed that up one more notch and said, what else can I do with that life insurance policy that maybe you haven't thought of? And one of the answers is simply this. We know that part of the issue with the 4% rule is that you have to live through volatility, right? Mm-hmm. The markets, although they may average 8%, they are made up of lots of different returns, up and down. Some are positive, some are negative, some are big, some are small, but the average might be 8 or 9%, right? Well, here's a funny thing about averages. If I have a bucket of 0-degree water and a bucket of 200-degree water, and I put a foot in each bucket, on average, I should be comfortable, but I really have 2 unhappy feet, don't I?
Right.
So we want to be very careful about averages when it comes to retirement planning. So one of the things the life insurance policy can do for us is, imagine when the markets are negative. The worst thing you can do is pull money out of your retirement account in a down market, right? Not only did I have to pull money out to consume it for my purposes, but I took a loss in the markets. It is very hard for the market to recover when there's a loss and a withdrawal on top of that. But what if I used my cash value for those negative years, especially when retirement just gets started? where instead of having to sell my 401k or my investments, that I can borrow from my cash value and let the markets come back over time. Because historically, that's what they do. If I can do that, I'm no longer playing with this volatility. And in fact, I no longer am playing the 4% rule, because the 4% rule is so low because we have to navigate ups and downs. Well, if I have much fewer downs, I can actually take out more money than the 4% rule at the same level of risk as the 4% rule. So maybe I can now take out 6 or 7% from the same asset base than your friend who might be taking out 4. Well, that's a significant improvement in cash flow from the same asset base, right?
Right.
So that's one option. We call that beat the bear, right? Beat the bear markets. The second option, and that's for people who still are okay with risk, right? These are the type of people they got their 401ks, they're comfortable with the markets, but what they really need is just to have that buffer for when the markets are negative. And if we look at markets, typically in a decade, they're not that negative more than 2 or 3 times in a decade. Most of the time, the markets are fairly positive. We just need that ability to handle the occasional negative markets, and that smooths out that ride for us.
And if I may interject really quickly too,
Time
Walter.
is everything.
Yes. Well, what also made me think about what you were just illustrating is for the individuals out there who believe in the ideology of invest by term and invest the difference, right? So with this specific ideology, right, we're investing the difference. And let's say that it's all in the stock market, for example, because we don't have any diversification through a 401k, for example. In this instance, what are you going to do in the down markets? Because that's the one gap with that specific ideology that we're missing, which is how are we going to make sure that our income is always going to perform regardless of what's happening externally. So that's definitely something that I wanted to make sure I address. So thank you.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic thing. And buy term invest the difference is really being debunked by the academic world from the distribution plan. Yes, for example, you might have a little bit more money than I do, but if you're living in 4% land and I'm living in 6% land, I'm a winner, right? It's like having the barrel of money, the same barrel of money, but if my spigot is bigger than your spigot, I get more water, right? And so the idea is to be able to create the platform that lets you get to that place later on in retirement. Otherwise, you are relegated to the 4% rule, which really requires more money to make it work, right? And we want to think about, if we think of ourselves like a business, we want to be efficient with how we generate income, right? We want to generate the most money with the fewest dollars, and that's what actuarial science and investments allows us to do.
Yeah, right. And probably the biggest thing is the fact that life insurance policy is a non-correlated asset where it has nothing to do with the stock market. So what you're able to do is you're able to skip over those dips because it has nothing to do with the stock market. So if the stock market is down, then you don't have to worry about your cash value being affected because it has nothing to do with the market.
That's correct. Which way do whole life policies always go?
In the
when
opposite
markets
direction.
are down, they still go up.
Yeah, exactly.
So we know not only are they not impacted, but we know that we're going to have an increase in that policy next year, right? So it's that magical component of that cash value. The second option,
go ahead,
if you want this fifth option, is there's something what I call pension 2.0. And this is for folks who want to have that repeated income coming into them month after month for as long as they live. So there's an interesting different levels of kinds of annuities. Now, if you think about an annuity is a promise of an insurance company to give us an income for as long as we live, however long that is. If we live a long time, we spend a lot of insurance dollars money. If we live a shorter period of time, then we just didn't quite get that benefit. It's a lot like Social Security or a normal pension, right? But there's a special kind of annuity that pays for as long as you live. The downside to it is that when you die, the income stops, just like Social Security. So people say, well, why would I ever buy that, right? I would never want to leave my spouse or my kids without that money. But if we have a life insurance policy, what part of that life insurance policy might we use if we had a premature death? And that'd be the death benefit, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So let's say, for example, I have $1 million in death benefit when I retire. Then I can take $1 million if I want to of my asset base. I can buy this special annuity. And in today's interest rates, it's around 8.5%, guaranteed for the rest of my life. And if I die tomorrow, my family gets all the money back. But if I live a long time, not only do I enjoy a significantly bigger cash flow for a long period of time, but then eventually my kids will get all the money back. And so it's a very elegant way of being able to design a pension where I get this guaranteed income for as long as I live, far better than the 4% rule. And I still get all the money I spent in retirement back to someone that I love, my family, my wife, or whomever it might be.
I love, again, the illustrations are perfect because as we started understanding finance in our career and learning the different financial products that are available to us, when whole life came into our life, that changed everything, right? And as we all know, with Wealth Nation, we've paid off debt, we've invested in all sorts of things. And now as life cycles are changing, we're also recognizing, exactly to your point, the fifth option, how much of an asset this can be to us in retirement and being able to leverage the cash value and also the death benefit, how that's going to pay back. Because exactly what you were saying, the thought about annuities is, why would I have this product that isn't going to leave anything to my family in the future? So just understanding product design, understanding the nuances, and partnering with people who can have you accomplish the goals that you're actually trying to accomplish, as opposed to just, kind of like the buffet style, everybody sign up for one of these. Like when you take ownership of your retirement, when you take ownership of your financial journey, amazing things can happen.
Right. And whole life insurance to me is one of those gifts that just keeps on giving. And the reason why I say that is I think about our experience when we started with getting out of debt using our life insurance policy. But in this journey, it opened up so many other things on how we could use our life insurance policies, from getting loans from the bank using our policy, from using our policy for retirement and down markets, for using our retirement to offset an annuity, so that our family can continue to earn money in our absence, to using our life insurance policies for reverse mortgages. There's so many things that we can use this tool for. However, we have to be in the pool to benefit from the idea.
You got to get in the water.
You got to get in the water.
Yeah, you got to start swimming, right? Because the pool looks great on the deck, on the chair, the beach chair, but it doesn't look that great until you get in the water and start understanding and putting this together.
Now, Walter, how much of this is affected based on our age? Like, a lot of people feel like they've gotten into the water late. What is the adjustment that mentally that we need to have if we feel this way coming into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we get older, efficiency becomes even more important when it comes to generating retirement income, right? We have to understand that compounding curve that we love to start the day we're born, right? But whenever we get on that compounding curve, if we don't have time for it to get to that steep end at the period of time, then we can't just rely on brute force of savings or time to make that money worth more. So we have to be ruthlessly more efficient in how will I generate that income? And so the 4% rule is not going to be very helpful to us because we won't have enough money to make that work. But when we are able to incorporate the insurance world with the investments, we will still get a much better lift with whatever retirement income we would have had versus what we can aspire to. Mm-hmm. So even if you're in your 50s, like me, there's no problem to be thinking about that. When I learn how to combine my savings in the insurance world, I will always be in a better place than if I just rely on one or the other, right? Mm-hmm. It's the combination of the two that releases that efficiency that will help you at whatever stage you're in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now let's put some steps together for our listeners. So let's say I am 45 and I'm recognizing that I need to start putting a plan together because I haven't put a plan together. What would you say are the steps, like maybe steps 1 through 3, because we're just starting out? What are some easy things that I can start doing to prepare myself to turn the ship in the right direction?
And another thing I add to that is the fact that people switch jobs often. And when they switch jobs, what we've seen is a lot of people take the money that they had in retirement and they take it when they switch jobs. So they're in essence starting over every single time.
Yeah. So with that, I'm 45. What can I do to better prepare myself?
So what we want to do is I think most people need to go on this kind of a journey of discovery, right? Because most people are just kind of going to follow the traditional retirement planning, which is put as much money into their 401k as they can. And then they get to retirement and they have this barrel of money and no idea of how to access the money, right? And so then they're going to have to access the least amount because of the fact that we just have to be careful that we don't run out of money. So step one is we want to get some sense for, if we follow this traditional path, how much money do we think we're going to have when we get to retirement. So I'm putting money into 401ks and it grows at 6, 7, 8%, whatever number you want it to grow to. How much money do I think that will eventually give me? Then we want to multiply that by 4%, right? That gives me kind of a back of the napkin estimate of what income can I expect. For most of us, it's going to be a disappointment, right? Because we're not going to save $10 million and say, okay, great, I get to live on as much money as I want. For most of us, we're going to probably land in that $1 or $2 or $3 million range, right? That is of constant savings for that to be the case. But then we want to understand that if I can live on 6 or 7 or 8%, how much more income that might generate for us. And so now the question is, how do I get there? Well, I need to buy this life insurance policy that it gives me these two other choices. Build the cash value so that I have maybe 3 to 5 years of income in there to negate those negative markets. Or buy a certain death benefit so that I know if I buy that annuity at maybe an 8% distribution rate, that I get substantially more income from my asset base, right? And just appreciate the difference between the two strategies and how much income that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, and I was going to say too, as you were talking about annuities, we have many people who say, Carmen and Darius, I don't have anybody to leave money to, right? So maybe an annuity for those individuals would be of a benefit for you. And that was just something that I wanted to bring in since you had mentioned annuities. Now let's talk about, I'm 55. What do we do?
So
Does
let's
it
say you're
change?
55 and you've done a good job with maybe 401k. Maybe you've said, you've been putting money into 401k all your time. Here's the interesting thing. Appreciate how much improvement there is by maxing out your 401k when you're in your 50s. And what I mean by that is there isn't very much time for compounding to happen, is there?
Right.
If I'm putting in $10,000 a year, age 55 to age 65, when I start taking that money out, most of that money is the money I put in. There's very little compounder interest that the policy has earned, or the 401k has earned, especially if there may be a downturn in the market. So instead, what if I took some of those dollars I was going to put in the 401k and bought a life insurance policy with that allowed me to have the gateway to these two other choices for retirement income generation? I may find that I'm in a better income place when I get to 60, not necessarily balance sheet, but better income. Remember, we're solving for cash flow. No CFO has ever bragged about their balance sheet on CNBC. They brag about their cash flow. So let go of the idea that more money is always better. I am solving for cash flow. Now, of course, bigger balance sheets are always a good indication of things. But the reality is if I don't have time to get there, then I need to be as ruthlessly efficient with how to generate income with what I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing that I don't think that we've addressed also too is when we're looking at a whole life insurance policy, like that's one of the few assets that is going to provide a guarantee. So with the growth of the cash value, the growth of the death benefit, like that's going to be an amazing asset for you to have in your back pocket, especially as you're preparing for retirement. Because what we've also seen too is some of our baby boomers immediately start investing and spending money in investments and they haven't protected the principal. So what a policy will allow you to do is to protect the principal, right? And then when you make investments, just borrow from the cash value so that you can use OPM, other people's money, and your money can stay liquid, earning that compound interest. And that's the hack that we tend to see that really exponentially grows your wealth and your ability to create cash flow. Now, let's talk about 65. Let's keep it going. I'm 65. What do I do? Does the story change?
Or is there a story?
It does change a little bit because buying a life insurance policy, a lot of people are not as healthy as they once were, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't create cash flow from annuities, right? Where we can say, I could take a percentage of that money for the annuity world and buy guaranteed income sources of guaranteed income. And so then we might look more at a bucket planning strategy where we have a certain amount of dollars that are dedicated for different time periods in my life. So for example, maybe we take a simple 3-bucket approach where I have the first year of money is sitting in my bank. So if the markets are negative, my first year of retirement, I'm good to go, right? I'm not worried about the negative money. Then we have that soon bucket, money we're going to use soon, that has the ability to have money, maybe that next 7, 8 years of money that I can use that's in a safer place, right? And then I have later money. Those are the dollars where I can take a little bit more risk. We know that out of retirement, what we call the retirement red zone, that is the most important part of surviving negative markets, because it has the most impact to you right before and right after retirement. We can't afford negative markets to impact our spending or we're going to end up spending more during those negative years because of volatility, and we'll have less money later on. So if we segment dollars in our later years, dollars that are meant for this year, dollars that are meant for the next handful of years that are safe, then aren't impacted by markets, and then give the markets the money that can grow and has the time to be up and down in those later years. And so maybe a simple bucket approach can help people that are in their 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. And then also too, this is an amazing point between 60s and 70s where if you do look at annuities or start looking at life insurance policies, you can also leverage your children and your grandchildren to get policies, right? Because we know that growth is going to be traditionally longer, right, than yours. So that would allow you to start planting those seeds for your family if you haven't done already, where you'll be able to pass the policies on to your adult children and your grandchildren, and you're starting their cash flow journey. So let's keep it going. What about 75? Do we have options when we're 75? Might as well, just hit everybody.
Your retirement
towards that guaranteed income purchases, right? We're not buying as much life insurance when we're 75.
Yeah.
If you're wealthy, then there are certain policies to help with estate taxes. That we work with, to make sure that Uncle Sam doesn't take more of your family's money than Uncle Sam needs to. So if you're in that fortunate position, then there's estate planning work that we do. If you're not quite as wealthy, then again, I think it's the same idea that once we're past 65, we probably look more towards a bucket strategy in terms of how to make sure our dollars are in the right place, the right time, doing the right things, right? So there's not just one lump sum of money, that I really am segregating these dollars for the jobs that they need to do and the time period that they're going to do it in.
Yeah.
And if you are blessed with a little extra money, then Carmen, I think you're absolutely right. We have a lot of clients who purchase the life insurance policies for their children, so that when they get to that retirement age, they have the actuarial science done. And it may not be as fun as a present as a new car or something, but I'll tell you, it is a much more powerful way to give our children that independence, so that now if they're investing in the markets or doing other kinds of investments, they can now merge the investments and the insurance together to create that pension 2.0, or to create that ability to beat the bear markets and give them a much more robust income for their lifetimes. What a great legacy gift.
Oh man, it makes me think of the Allen Iverson and Reebok situation where Allen Iverson was spending too much money, so Reebok put a plan together so that when he turns 50, he's able to get $50 million.
Oh.
So that's immediately what came to my mind when I think about buying life insurance on a younger person or on your child, to protect them for when they're of age and have more sense. But what I got from this conversation is the fact that it's never too late. It's never too late.
Actual science is always available to us in different forms, right?
Yes.
And the power of actual science is, you guys, the idea that you brought the pool is that when you're in the actual science pool, insurance companies never know how long any one of us is going to live, but they can be very accurate when we have large numbers of people. And we can benefit from the fact that if it's an annuity, if I live a long time, then I use somebody else's money, right? That's called mortality credits. And if I have a life insurance policy, I will get a windfall of money that I never put the equal amount into the policy to earn. And so we can benefit from life insurance and annuities just because we're part of that actuarial pool.
Oh, it's such a game changer. And hopefully, Wealth Nation, you're listening, you're taking notes, because we have one of our most popular videos, right, is I'm 50 years old and haven't planned for retirement. So we did this video specifically for you so that you can, again, start planning, right? We talked about when you're 45, when you're 55, when you're 65, there are options. The other thing to note is I can hear you all, and I'm in tune, right? You're thinking like, what if I don't have the budget? Right, Walter, what do we do if like the cash flow right now, and I'm 55 years old or I'm 65 years old, just isn't where it needs to be in order for me to have this income that I hope to have? What do we do then?
Well, clearly we have to assess a budget a little bit, right? If we're overspending, we're overspending. We need to have a little bit of accountability to that, right?
There you go.
But we may also realize that, again, where I'm saving money, we have to understand, am I creating a balance sheet, or am I creating cash flow? What is the ultimate result going to be? And so we may decide that we might save differently, and that might result in more income for us at retirement, as opposed to just bragging about the fact that I have a lot of money in my 401k. Again, it's not the balance sheet that matters, it's the income generation that we get from that balance sheet. Someone can have a smaller balance sheet and more income than someone with a larger balance sheet, right? And that's what we're after.
That is powerful. Thank you for bringing that in, because yes, I can't tell you how many times people tell us like, oh, well, I'm 55 and maybe a policy might be too expensive for me. But yeah, let's just take a look at your spending, because if you're 55 years old, wealth happens when we're older. So is there something that we're missing? Is there opportunity? So yeah, where are you spending your money? Where are you focusing your efforts? Because maybe, like you said, we're in the BS realm and we need to be in you take it how you want to, or do we want to be looking at cash flow? So thank you for that. So you grabbed the book. Yeah. You got excited about something.
I grabbed the book. I think about Michael in this situation and the dynamic between him and his sister Kathleen. And
the characters in the book.
The characters in the book. And I think about my own family being, and yourself. We're the youngest in our family. My dad has 7 other brothers and sisters. My mom has 5 other brothers and sisters. And from our seat, we're able to see a lot of this play out in our own families, and we're able to understand where we want to position ourselves. We see some success stories and we see some horror stories. Now, with that experience, what we all have to do is take a look at our surrounding and see where we want to be, because there is no crystal ball, but we can look at our environment and see who we want to follow as far as like where they are at that particular time in their lives. And what you've done in this book is you painted that picture of I forgot Michael and Kathleen's father's name, but he was able to paint a picture for them for exactly where they want to go. And then you have the tale of 2 siblings, like me and my sister, where we think differently, so we have different experiences in life. And we again, I keep going back to this book. It plays out in this book to where I think what we should do is read this book, follow the characters, and see mentally where we end up in our own personal situation and who we see in our lives. That's a reflection of the positioning we want to take.
Yeah, I think you said that really well, which is in the book, there's different characters. There's, the husband and wife who are going through this journey of discovery, and they're doing everything right. They're doing everything that traditional financial planning tells them to do. The problem is that the 4% rule just felt like a complete failure in terms of the income they were hoping for. And so they're looking for this other option, which the father helps them understand. And then we have these 2 other characters. We have the father that has $1 million who watches CNBC every single day and is worried about doing anything because what if tomorrow the markets drop? And then they have the other character who's on a pension and who's traveling all over the place because not a care in the world, because I know next month my money's coming in again. And somebody's much happier in retirement with less money than the person with more money who is always anxious about what markets might happen.
It made me think about Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and we think about the environments that we put ourselves in. Our money mindset a lot of time is just the programming that our parents put into us subconsciously, consciously, whatever the relationship was. So we like to say that all the time. It's like, follow the money. Where is the money? Who has the lifestyles and has the characteristics that you want to bring in, and follow that, as opposed to following just what you see is happening in your environment.
Right.
Traditions in general are very hard to break, right? Traditional thinking. And so I always use a story that there was a famous astrologer in the 1600s who came up with this astounding discovery. And the discovery was simply that the earth revolved around the sun and not the opposite. And that was a dangerous thing for this gentleman to come up with, because traditional thinking, society said that's impossible, but he proved it mathematically. And it took another 100 years before society finally relinquished the idea that the earth is revolving around the sun. And that plays out in our financial planning thinking too. We've had this traditional way of handling things that might have worked in generations past, but we're in a new modern economy where you are responsible for your own financial outcome. And so it is incumbent upon all of us to learn for all of the different options that exist. And unfortunately, some of the options are still in the ivory tower of the academic world, and is slowly making their ways into more traditional financial planning approaches. Hopefully, this information will become more ubiquitous to all of us, so that we can understand there are better ways of generating retirement income planning than just the 4% rule.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And thank you, Walter, because as we wrap up, I want to bring in what you first started talking about, which is comparing corporate finance to personal finance. And if we follow the money, corporations have a lot of money, have the majority of it, right, from time to time, depending on what corporation we're talking about. But the point is, if we treat our personal finance the same way corporations do, we treat it like a business, we respect it like a business, we create cash flow, right? Because we have to employ. We might not be employing people in our personal finance.
We should think about employing ourselves.
Right? So that we can have the success that we want to have for ourselves, for our families, and so on and so forth. So if you didn't take anything from this call today, family, the main thing is going back to ownership. We preach ownership, and it is never okay for you to put things on autopilot and hope that it's just going to take care of itself. And that's why we continue to see people are outliving their retirement and going back to work and trying to figure out, what do we do with our time and our efforts. So Walter, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you for the tangible assets that you're teaching our audience and what they can start doing, and just planting those seeds, right? And for the other thing too, we want to make sure is, where can people find you, Walter? We'll also leave a link to your book in the description, but where would you like people to find you?
You can certainly find me at thefifthoption.com. My email is walter@thefifthoption.com, all spelled out, THEFIFTHOPTION. I'd be happy to discuss how the book works and philosophies, and be of service in any way I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Walter, for your time. And if you want to check out another video or the old video that we did on 50 years old and nothing saved for retirement, check out our next video.
And remember to own your own lifestyle,
or someone else will.